If you had told me last week that I would be escorted out of my office by security, clutching a cardboard box filled with my favorite pens, a ceramic mug, and 30 years of professional pride, I would have laughed. But on a gray Monday morning in Pacific Heights, San Francisco, that is exactly what happened. My name is Evelyn Hartley. I am 62 years old. I have spent the last 3 decades navigating the complicated maze of city permits and environmental compliance in one of the most regulated regions in America. I was not flashy, I was not loud, but I was precise, efficient, and trusted by every city planner, zoning officer, and contractor who mattered. And yet, none of that saved me when Spencer Rourke, the 30-something managing director of Ecoforma Innovations, leaned back in his ergonomic chair, folded his perfectly manicured fingers, and said with a rehearsed corporate tone, "We're restructuring, Evelyn. It's time for fresh energy." He was smiling when he said it, the kind of smile people practice in the mirror before giving bad news. On the edge of his sleek desk was the certificate I had just handed him, confirming that my intern, Kara Sloan, had completed her 4-month training. Kara, with her platinum bob, 1,000-watt Instagram smile, and absolutely no idea how a setback variance worked. I had spent my evenings and weekends mentoring her, believing I was shaping the next generation of regulatory professionals. Turns out, I was shaping my own replacement. "Today will be your last day," Spencer said. "We'll provide 2 weeks of severance, and of course, we truly appreciate your contributions." 2 weeks. After 7 years at Ecoforma and over 3 decades in the field. My chest tightened. I managed to nod, swallowing the sting in my throat. "Is there a transition period?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "The Green Horizon project still has 3 permits pending with the city. I'm the listed liaison." Spencer waved dismissively. "Kara is fully briefed. She'll take it from here." I doubted she even knew which floor the planning department was on, let alone who to talk to. But I did not argue. I had learned long ago that dignity is something you do not let other people take from you. Security arrived at noon. As they walked me through the minimalist glass lobby, Kara stood at the front desk, tapping away at her phone. She glanced up, offered me a tight smile that did not reach her eyes, then looked back down. My exit had all the drama of a ghost vanishing from a place that had already moved on. Outside, fog rolled through the neighborhood like a whisper. I sat in my car, staring at the building that had once been a symbol of my second chance. After the 2008 crash, I had nearly left the industry. It was Spencer who called me back, telling me Ecoforma needed someone with deep regulatory ties and a reputation for getting permits approved on time. Someone like me. For 7 years, I had been that someone. But somewhere along the line, my usefulness had become inconvenient. I drove home in silence. My daughter, Lily, called as I was making tea. She immediately sensed something was wrong. "You're home early. Everything okay?" "I got fired today." "What? Why? What happened?" I explained everything. The intern, the restructuring, the humiliating way it had all been handled. There was a pause on the line. "That's discrimination, Mom. Age discrimination. You should fight it." "Maybe," I said, staring out at the potted herbs on my balcony. "But I think I have a better idea." That night, I opened the file I kept on my personal laptop. Digital documents, memorandums, signed agreements. Everything related to the Green Horizon project. Everything filed through my independent consultancy, Hartley Urban Compliance. A company I had quietly founded 3 years ago when the city asked me to streamline approvals for green infrastructure projects. A company that had grown into an indispensable part of San Francisco's planning machine. Spencer had forgotten something important in his rush to look modern. He might have fired me from Ecoforma, but he could not fire me from my own business. And without my digital signature, the Green Horizon permits were frozen in place. I took a sip of tea and leaned back in my chair. This would not be about revenge. It would be about clarity, about showing them exactly what they lost. And I was going to enjoy every moment of it. Tuesday morning arrived with a quiet breeze drifting in from the bay. I woke early, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and sat at my small kitchen table, reviewing the documents I had built my second career upon. Each file was meticulously labeled, cross-referenced, and linked to timelines that only I fully understood. This was not just paperwork. This was leverage. 3 years ago, Don Morales, the senior planning officer at San Francisco's Department of Urban Design, reached out to me with a problem. The city was drowning in delays. Too many developers, not enough staff, and too many forms lost in bureaucratic limbo. Don knew my reputation for precision. He asked if I could create a bridge, a third-party consultancy to serve as a trusted go-between. That was how Hartley Urban Compliance was born. Since then, my name had quietly appeared on over 24 of the city's most sustainable developments. My company was more than a side business. It was the reason many of those projects moved at all. And now, with the Green Horizon project entering its final approval stage, the city required one thing: my digital sign-off. I picked up my phone and called Monica Reyes, an old friend and an excellent employment attorney. She answered on the second ring. "Evelyn," she said, her voice still warm despite the early hour. "Heard you got canned." "That true?" "Yes," I replied, "but it gets better. The permits for Green Horizon, filed under Hartley Urban Compliance. Without my signature, they go nowhere." There was a pause, then a low whistle. "That's quite a card to play. I want to know my rights before I do." We met later that afternoon at a quiet cafe in the marina. Over chamomile tea, I laid everything out. The consulting agreements, the filing structure, the emails from Don Morales confirming the city's reliance on my LLC. Monica reviewed the papers with the intensity of a trial lawyer preparing for court. "You're clean," she said finally. "No conflict of interest, no overlap in contract terms. You're under no obligation to complete those permits unless compensated appropriately. I want to send Ecoforma a proposal. Professional. Direct. Let them know I'm willing to complete the process for a fair consulting fee." "How much are we talking?" $75,000. That's 9 months of a salary. They no longer want to pay me. Monica smirked. "Plus credit on all project documentation." "Of course," I said, smiling back. That evening, she drafted a letter and sent it to Spencer's inbox with a subject line: "Proposal for Regulatory Compliance Services." I expected silence. I received panic. By Wednesday morning, I had 6 missed calls from Spencer, 2 from Kara, and 1 rather desperate voicemail asking for a chat to clear the air. I ignored all of them. If they wanted air cleared, they could open a window. At 11 o'clock, my phone rang again. This time, it was not someone from Ecoforma. It was Don Morales. "Evelyn," he said, his tone lined with relief. "Thank God you picked up. We've got a problem. Ecoforma is trying to push through the final approval for Green Horizon, but the entire permit sequence is tied to your consultancy. We cannot move without your authorization." "I'm aware," I said calmly. "My employment with Ecoforma ended on Monday. Hartley Urban Compliance is still active, but no one's contracted my services. Can we bypass your firm?" "Not legally," I replied. "Not under the agreement we established 3 years ago." Don sighed heavily. "That's what I told them. Look, I'm staying out of the politics, but if you decide to proceed, I trust you'll do it right." "I always do," I said. After we hung up, I opened my inbox. Spencer had finally responded to Monica's letter. The tone was entirely different now. Gone was the dismissive language. In its place was a frantic plea for a phone call. He was offering to discuss possible compensation and asked if I would consider helping the team transition smoothly. There would be no team, and no smooth transition. That evening, as I strolled through my neighborhood, I paused by the community garden I had helped fund through a grant 2 years prior. A woman in her 70s was tending to the rosemary bush. We exchanged smiles. There was something powerful about being useful, about having knowledge that no one could replicate with a YouTube video and a ring light. At home, my daughter Lily called again. "You look calm, Mom." "Too calm. I'm considering buying orchids," I replied. "Spencer's panicking. They'll lose the Green Horizon deal if I walk." "Are you going to walk?" "I might do better," I said. "I might walk in a different direction entirely." Because the truth was, someone else was about to call me. Someone who would change the shape of the story. And he was not from Ecoforma. Thursday morning dawned warm and clear, the kind of rare, cloudless spring day that made San Francisco shimmer. I was in the middle of trimming my window plants when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was local. I hesitated, then picked up. "Mrs. Hartley?" This is Liu Chen. I froze. Liu Chen was the principal investor behind the Green Horizon project. A self-made billionaire with a reputation for speed, precision, and no tolerance for incompetence. He rarely called anyone personally. For him to be calling me meant one thing: the crisis at Ecoforma had reached his desk. Yes, Mr. Chen, I replied carefully. What can I do for you? I understand there's an issue with the permitting process, he said, direct but polite. Spencer Rourke has not been able to explain it to my satisfaction. I said nothing, letting the silence do its work. I've reviewed the filings, he continued. Your firm, Hartley Urban Compliance, is listed as the official regulatory liaison. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct. And your employment with Ecoforma has ended 3 days ago. Abruptly. I see. May I meet with you? He was not asking. We arranged to meet the next morning at his private office in a high-rise overlooking the Presidio. I hung up, heart pounding. This was not just a conversation. This was a negotiation. And for the first time in days, I felt entirely alive. I spent the evening preparing. I printed out copies of every key permit, every form bearing my company's watermark, every email exchange with the city. I dressed with care: navy slacks, a tailored blouse, low heels that whispered authority rather than shouted it. Liu Chen's office was a minimalist masterpiece: black marble, clean lines, floor-to-ceiling glass. A young assistant greeted me and escorted me into a private conference room with a view of the bay. Moments later, he arrived. Tall, silver-haired, and commanding, Liu Chen extended his hand. Mrs. Hartley, thank you for coming. We sat. He wasted no time. Tell me, in plain terms, why my project is at a standstill. I opened my folder, revealing the matrix of permits, timelines, and the approval path. I explained the expedited process I had built with the city, how my company had become the trusted intermediary, and why without my digital signature, the final authorizations would not be granted. I submitted a proposal to Ecoforma, I said, outlining a fair consulting fee to complete the process. $75,000, Leo said, nodding. I saw the number. And professional credit on all project documentation, I added. And their response? They want to talk. Nothing concrete. Leo steepled his fingers, eyes fixed on me. Spencer made a critical error in judgment. He prioritized image over execution. He stood and walked to the window, hands behind his back. Mrs. Hartley, would you consider working directly with Warren Development Group? I would like to retain your firm not just for Green Horizon, but for every urban project we have in the city over the next 2 years. I blinked. That's generous. It's practical, he said simply. You get the job done. I do not have the luxury of waiting for Ecoforma to fix its mistakes. I considered the offer carefully, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted him to know I was no longer someone who rushed to say yes just to be included. I accept, I said, extending my hand. We shook. It was done. As I walked out of the building, the sun catching the edges of the skyline, my phone vibrated again. A new email. From Spencer. Subject line: * emergency meeting, 3 p.m. today. Please attend. Consultation fee negotiable, *. I deleted it. When I arrived home, a delivery sat waiting on my doorstep. A bouquet of lilies with a card that read, * so sorry for the misunderstanding. Please call Spencer. We need you, *. The signature was Kara's. I placed the bouquet in the arms of my elderly neighbor who adored fresh flowers and returned to my living room with a sense of quiet satisfaction. Tomorrow, the headlines would begin to shift, and Ecoforma would learn something they had long forgotten. Reputation is not built in followers. It is built in trust. Friday morning began with the kind of ripple that always signals something larger is coming. My phone was already buzzing when I poured my first cup of coffee. Voicemails, missed calls, and text messages, most from unfamiliar numbers. Developers, old colleagues, even reporters. The news had broken. A local business outlet had published the story, Permit Crisis Delays Green Horizon Project. The article named names. It described how Ecoforma Innovations had failed to secure proper final approvals after terminating their longtime regulatory expert, Evelyn Hartley, just days before the project's final submission deadline. But the part that drew real attention was the second half of the article. Investor Leo Chen retains Hartley Urban Compliance to oversee all San Francisco projects. It was not just news. It was a bombshell. Within hours, every major development firm in the Bay Area knew what had happened. They understood what it meant. I was no longer someone's employee. I was the woman Leo Chen called personally when a $42 million project was falling apart. The article included a quote from Don Morales at the city planning office. Mrs. Hartley has long been a trusted liaison between our department and the private sector. Her departure from Ecoforma has no bearing on her legal authority over the Green Horizon permits. We are continuing to work with her directly. I had not asked Don for a statement, but I appreciated it more than I could say. That afternoon, Monica called. "Your inbox surviving the flood?" she asked. "Barely. You saw the article?" "Saw it. Evelyn, I framed it." She chuckled, then turned serious. "Leo's legal team sent over the contract. I've reviewed every clause. It is even better than you expected. 2-year minimum term. Performance bonuses for early approvals. Full autonomy. And this is the fun part. Leo has included a clause allowing him to reject any architectural partners for future projects." I smiled slowly. "So if he chooses, he can cut Ecoforma out completely." "Precisely." I signed the contract that evening, sending a scanned copy back to Monica with a shaky hand. Not from fear, but from the overwhelming clarity that life had just pivoted. This was no longer about salvaging my reputation. This was about building something far bigger. At 3 o'clock sharp, a final email arrived from Spencer. Subject: *, we're ready to meet your full terms. Please respond urgently, *. I did not respond. Instead, I joined Leo and his team at their downtown headquarters for our first transition meeting. I was introduced as the new head of regulatory affairs for all San Francisco-based developments. Leo led the meeting with the precision of a general. Ecoforma's role in Green Horizon is officially terminated, he announced. They failed to manage risk and compromised the project timeline. Hartman and Associates will take over architectural responsibilities, effective immediately. I blinked. Hartman and Associates was Ecoforma's largest competitor, and now they were leading the city's most visible green infrastructure project. What about the existing designs? I asked. We retain ownership of all plans and specifications per the original agreement. Hartman will honor the core layout with adjustments where needed. The team nodded. There was no time for drama. No one cried over spilled permits here. After the meeting, I stepped into the hallway and stared out at the city I had served in silence for so many years. Below me stretched the very riverfront that Green Horizon was meant to transform, a landscape I had helped design, not with bricks and glass, but with zoning codes, drainage variances, and obscure soil testing exemptions that only someone like me could navigate. And now, I would be the one guiding it all forward. I was walking to the elevator when I spotted Kara's name flash across my phone screen. Another message. Another plea. This time, I did not even open it. Some things are better left unread. By Monday morning, the silence from my end had become louder than any reply I could have offered. Ecoforma had gone from confident dismissal to full-blown crisis management mode in less than a week. But their biggest mistake was not firing me. Their mistake was assuming I had no way to fight back. That morning, the front page of the San Francisco Business Chronicle read, "Investor drops Ecoforma from Green Horizon project, citing permit mismanagement." The subheading was even sharper. Hartley Urban Compliance to lead all future Warren developments in Bay Area. The fallout was immediate. 2 more firms called me before noon. One wanted to consult on a waterfront zoning case. The other was preparing a bid for a new transit-oriented complex in Oakland and needed someone to fast-track their approvals. I declined both. Not because I did not want the work, but because I now had the luxury of choosing what aligned with my values and my time. Back at Ecoforma, Spencer's composure was cracking. He sent a new email with the subject line, "Full reinstatement offer plus compensation review." I knew what it meant. He wanted me back. He wanted to undo everything. But time does not reverse itself. Kara also sent a follow-up, this time with a more personal tone. "I know the situation got complicated. I never wanted you to be treated that way. Please, can we talk?" I deleted both messages. There was a reason I had stopped speaking. I wanted them to feel the space I used to occupy, the meetings I used to lead, the questions only I used to answer. I wanted them to understand what it truly meant when experience walked out the door. The city planning office called next. Don Morales again. "You would not believe what Spencer tried to pull today," he said, chuckling darkly. "Tell me." He suggested the city should review the permit process and consider automating parts of it. Claimed the system was too dependent on legacy liaisons. I laughed. Legacy liaisons. That's a new one. We reminded him that the process we used was co-developed with your firm, Don said, and that if they wanted to opt out, they could, by starting from scratch. And he turned pale. Then he asked if there was any way we could transfer oversight to someone else. The answer was no. Of course it was. That same afternoon, I met with Leo Chen and the team at Hartman and Associates for the next phase of Green Horizon. The energy in the room was electric. Everyone was aligned, efficient, focused. We discussed materials, scheduling, environmental impact reports, and public communication strategy. Leo leaned over at one point and said, "Funny how fast things move when the right person is in the room." "I've always believed delays are never just about paperwork," I replied. "They're about people." That evening, I sat on my terrace, sipping herbal tea while reading over the finalized documents Monica had sent me. My role was officially expanded. I was now Chief Compliance Advisor across all Warren development projects in Northern California. The title sounded fancy, but the power behind it was very real. The doorbell rang. A courier stood outside holding a large white envelope with Ecoforma's logo embossed on it. I signed for it, then set it aside unopened. I already knew what it contained, another desperate attempt to reclaim what they had thrown away. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting a proposal for something new, a mentorship and reentry initiative for women over 50 who had been pushed out of their industries. If firms like Ecoforma could not see our value, then we would build something that did. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lily. "Mom, I just saw the news. Ecoforma lost another client." "Which one?" "A high-rise project in Mission Bay. They followed Leo's lead and moved their account to Hartman." I smiled. "That makes 3. "What happens to Kara?" she asked softly. "She'll find her way. Or she won't. Because this story was no longer about her. Or Spencer. Or the ones who underestimated me. It was about reclaiming a career that should never have been threatened in the first place. And I had only just begun. It was Wednesday morning when Leo Chen called to ask if I would join him for a press briefing at City Hall. The mayor was expected to attend, along with the director of urban development and several high-profile members of the Green Horizon Project Coalition. I hesitated only for a moment. "Will Spencer be there?" I asked. Leo chuckled. "No. This is a forward-facing conversation. We're here to talk about what works." I agreed. City Hall was buzzing when I arrived. Camera crews were already setting up along the grand marble steps. Inside, the chamber was filled with developers, city officials, and members of the press. The Green Horizon Project had become the symbol of both innovation and caution, a project that almost collapsed because of one bad decision and was now back on track because of the person they had let go. I was introduced not as a former employee, not even as a consultant, but as the architect of the compliance model that made Green Horizon possible. It was the first time in my career that someone had said those words out loud, in public, with cameras rolling. Don Morales stepped up to the microphone and delivered a clear message. "In our field, delays are expensive, but mistakes are fatal. Evelyn Hartley has kept the city on track for over a decade. Her contributions go far beyond any one firm." The mayor nodded in agreement and offered me a small smile from across the stage. When the event ended, reporters approached one after another, asking me for statements. I declined most interviews, but I offered one line that made the front page the next day. "Respecting expertise is not just about being fair. It is about being effective." That quote was reprinted by 3 different business journals by nightfall. Later that evening, I returned home and found a package at my door. Inside was a bottle of wine and a handwritten note from Kara. "Evelyn, *, you were right about everything. I did not know what I was doing, and I should have told the truth. I tried to keep up, but the system is too complex, and now I am just in marketing. I never meant to hurt you. I hope someday we can talk again. Kara asterisk. I read the note twice. I felt no anger. Just the ache of something wasted. She had potential, but she had taken the fast lane instead of the hard road. And in our industry, shortcuts rarely led anywhere worth going. The following day, I met with 2 women interested in joining Hartley Urban Compliance. Both were in their 50s. Both had recently been pushed out of long careers at major firms after younger hires were brought in at half the pay. Why us? One of them asked cautiously. Because you know how to speak the language of the city, I replied. Because you understand that trust is earned, not assumed. And because no algorithm in the world can replace what decades in the field can teach you. They both accepted the offer. I created a new internal training program that week. Not for fresh college graduates with shiny portfolios and TikTok resumes, but for experienced professionals who had been cast aside. I call the program Second Foundation. Meanwhile, Ecoforma continued to unravel. The next headline appeared on Friday. Ecoforma faces client exodus following Green Horizon loss. It was a brutal piece, naming 3 developers who had publicly terminated contracts with the firm. Spencer was quoted once, defensive, vague, and clearly in over his head. And then came the phone call I had not expected. It was from Don Morales. Spencer just tried to file a public complaint, he said. Claimed you had sabotaged the permit process on purpose. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my tea. And what did you say? I asked. I told him the permit process cannot be sabotaged by someone doing it correctly. Then I reminded him his firm signed off on the expedited liaison agreement years ago and never read the fine print. Ah, the fine print, I said, still smiling. Always where the truth hides. As the sun set that night over Pacific Heights, I sat in my study watching the golden light stretch across the city skyline. My desk was covered in blueprints, schedules, and folders filled with new projects. But the document I reached for was different. It was the original termination letter Spencer had handed me 3 weeks earlier. I placed it next to the Business Chronicle with my quote printed in bold across the front page. Then I took a red pen, drew a line from one to the other, and wrote a single word. Forward. 3 weeks had passed since I signed the Warren Development contract. In that time, I had finalized 5 delayed permits, restructured 2 overlapping compliance timelines, and built a new review framework with the city planning office that would shave 6 weeks off most approval processes. Leo Chin called it magic. I called it memory, knowing which desk to walk up to, whose inbox to avoid, and when a verbal nudge was more effective than a digital reminder. But what happened next was not something I could have planned. It started with a blog post from an architecture graduate in Los Angeles. She wrote about the industry's obsession with youth and digital flair, about how her mother, once a respected engineer, had been let go without ceremony after training a younger male hire. The story echoed mine almost to the detail. Then another story emerged. And another, a former city inspector from Seattle, a planning consultant from Austin, a compliance analyst from Boston. They all shared the same arc, decades of skill, dismissed in favor of branding, and a quiet sense of betrayal. The media took notice. One article called it the midlife brain drain in urban development. Another used the headline, the permit queen who sparked a professional uprising. It was surreal. Suddenly, I was being asked to speak at panels, conferences, and webinars about reinvention, resilience, and what it meant to be indispensable. At first, I declined. I was too busy building something real. But when a planning association from Sacramento reached out and offered to sponsor Second Foundation as a formal retraining program, I said yes. The first workshop was held in an old city building with peeling paint and creaky floors. I brought in Don Morales as a guest speaker. He opened with a story about how many mistakes were avoided simply by having the right voice on the other end of the phone. By the end of the day, 3 attendees had job offers waiting in their inboxes. Leo watched the progress closely. You know, he said during one of our meetings, you are building something Ecoforma never understood how to measure. Loyalty. I nodded. Loyalty is earned quietly, one approval at a time. Meanwhile, Ecoforma continued to disintegrate. Their 4th client pulled out, this time, a major green tech expansion project that would have kept them solvent for another fiscal year. Spencer's desperate pivot to branding workshops and social media campaigns had not saved them. And then, something I never expected happened. Spencer called. I let it go to voicemail, but his voice, once polished and smug, now sounded small. Evelyn, I was wrong. About all of it. We needed you more than I admitted, and I handled things badly. If there's any way to talk, off the record, I'd appreciate it. I did not call back. There was nothing left to say. But I did reflect. There was a time when a call like that would have stirred anger. Or satisfaction. But I felt neither. I felt steady. Because I was no longer reacting to the past. I was shaping the future. The next week, I hosted an event called Legacy in Progress. It was a quiet gathering of midlife professionals from all over California. Engineers, permit officers, environmental compliance leads, retired planners, and displaced consultants. We shared stories, strategies, and job leads. One woman cried as she explained that it was the first time in years she had been called back into a conversation where her knowledge mattered. I walked home that night under the fog-kissed lights of Pacific Heights with something blooming in my chest that I had not felt in years. Purpose. And not the kind you cling to for survival, but the kind you extend to others because you have more than enough to give. The next morning, a framed article was delivered to my door. It had been sent by Don Morales. The headline read, Regulatory Royalty, How One Woman Redefined Power in Urban Planning. At the bottom was a handwritten note. For every project that moved forward because you stayed in the room. It was the second Friday of the month when the invitation arrived, an embossed envelope with gold trim, addressed in elegant handwriting. At first, I thought it was a client gala or another awards dinner I had no time to attend. But as I opened it, my breath caught. The City of San Francisco and Department of Urban Development request the honor of your presence at the dedication ceremony for the Evelyn Hartley Compliance Pavilion, honoring contributions to sustainable urban growth and public service. I reread it twice. I thought it was a mistake. Later that day, Don Morales called to confirm. We kept it quiet, he said. Leo wanted it to be a surprise. But the city insisted your name be on the permanent signage. You are the reason half our green corridor exists. The ceremony was set for the following week. I told no one. Not Lily, not Monica, not even the women at Second Foundation. I did not want an audience. I had spent my entire career moving pieces behind the curtain. But as the day approached, the news leaked, first through a small planning blog, then a local radio station, and finally, a front-page article in the Chronicle titled, The City's Quiet Architect. That morning, I stood in front of the new urban garden adjacent to Green Horizons Public Square. The Compliance Pavilion was a modest open-air structure, curved steel beams with reclaimed wood and solar panel awnings, designed to serve as a shaded workspace for public permit review and educational workshops. It was practical, efficient, and beautiful, just like the work it represented. The crowd was larger than expected. Over 100 people had gathered. I recognized former clients, colleagues, city officials, and even a few people from my early years in Sacramento, long before San Francisco ever called me. I took the podium slowly. The microphone was already adjusted. I had prepared no speech. I always thought I would retire quietly, I began. Just fade into the files and folders of people's memories. But it seems even paperwork can leave a legacy. The crowd chuckled softly. I never asked for praise. I never expected anyone to understand what it meant to be a permitting liaison. But I knew this much. Cities grow when the people behind them care more about doing things right than doing them fast. I cared, and I still do. Applause followed, but I barely heard it. My eyes caught something in the crowd, a familiar silhouette near the back. Kara Sloan, standing quietly, hands clasped in front of her. She wasn't holding a phone. She wasn't recording. She was just watching. I nodded once, not out of forgiveness, but acknowledgement. She had shown up. That was enough. After the ceremony, Leo approached with his usual calm confidence. You started a movement, Evelyn. Do you know that? I started a file folder, I replied, grinning. He handed me a small black box. Inside was a brass compass. On the back, it was engraved, for always knowing where true north is. I blinked away the heat behind my eyes. This is too much. No, he said. It is exactly right. That evening, Lily came over with takeout and 2 glasses of wine. We sat on the couch as the city glowed outside the window, the bay shimmering under a silver moon. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "The old office, the routine?" I took a long sip before answering. "No. I miss being underestimated. It made the payoff so much sweeter." She laughed. "So what's next?" I looked at the stack of new project requests on my desk. Then at the application forms for a grant I was funding for women-led infrastructure startups. Then at the email from a city in Oregon asking if I would help them create a version of the expedited process we had pioneered here. "Next," I said, "is planting more things that grow. Because legacy is not something you leave behind. It is something you expand, one signature at a time." It had been a month since the dedication of the pavilion, and life had settled into a rhythm again. I spent my mornings reviewing permit packages and mentoring my new team at Hartley Urban Compliance. My afternoons were filled with quiet walks through neighborhoods I had helped shape from the inside out. And yet, just when it all felt steady, the past tapped me on the shoulder again. It came in the form of a voicemail. "Evelyn, it's Spencer. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I'm calling because things at Ecoforma have taken a turn. The board asked me to step down. They're restructuring again. And Kara left. I just thought you should know." I did not call him back. I deleted the message, and then, for the first time since all this began, I opened the envelope they had couriered to my door weeks earlier. Inside was a letter. It wasn't printed on the usual glossy stationery. No gold embossed logo. Just a plain white sheet with Spencer's handwriting. "Evelyn. I thought I understood how this industry worked. I thought image mattered more than substance. That moving fast mattered more than building deep. I was wrong. I see now that what you did was more than work. It was legacy. I hope you find it in yourself to forgive me someday. Spencer. Forgiveness. That strange word. Heavy. Flexible. And sometimes unnecessary. That weekend, I visited the pavilion. It was quiet. A young woman sat under the solar awning, reviewing construction documents on a tablet. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Excuse me, are you?" I nodded. "Yes." She laughed nervously. "We've been using your process in class. I'm a grad student at SFU, Urban Design and Planning. Everyone talks about you like you're this mythical figure who fixed the permit grid." I smiled. "No magic. Just memory." We talked for a few minutes. She asked if I had any advice. "Never assume people know the rules," I told her. "Know them better than anyone else. Then bend them only when it builds something worthwhile." As I walked away, I passed a group of kids on a school tour, guided by a volunteer. They stopped at the entrance to the pavilion. "This structure was named after Evelyn Hartley," the guide said. "She changed the way our city gets things done. Not with power, but with patience." I turned the corner before they could see me smile. Back home, I pulled out a notebook where I had been sketching ideas for expanding Second Foundation. I had received emails from women in Portland, Denver, and Minneapolis asking if they could open chapters in their own cities. The idea had grown bigger than me. I decided it was time. I emailed Monica, let's start the paperwork for a nonprofit. I want Second Foundation to stand on its own, . By the time the sun dipped below the skyline, I had finished the first draft of our mission statement. We exist to return dignity to experienced professionals displaced by short-sighted trends. We honor legacy, elevate knowledge, and empower those who refuse to fade quietly. It was bold. It was clear. It was real. That night, Lily joined me for dinner again. She had started calling Friday evenings permit queen suppers, and I let her, even though the name made me roll my eyes. We shared soup and sourdough bread while she scrolled through her phone. "Mom, did you see this?" she asked, turning the screen to show me a new article. A quote from one of the Green Horizon Project heads. "Without Evelyn Hartley, none of this would have moved. She's not just a consultant. She's infrastructure. I raised an eyebrow. "Infrastructure? Well," Lily grinned, "you do hold the city together better than most steel beams." I laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A full, deep laugh that reached the parts of me that had been quiet for too long. It was a strange moment, realizing that the fight was no longer about being heard. Because I was being heard, clearly, everywhere. The final meeting for the Green Horizon project took place on a crisp morning in late April. The kind of morning when the fog hugged the hills and the city looked like it was exhaling slowly. I arrived early, not because I needed to, but because I liked to see the room before the chatter began. It reminded me that everything starts in silence. The conference space was different this time, larger, brighter, with polished floors and wide glass windows that looked out over the now-completed Park District. Leo Chin greeted me at the door. "Evelyn," he said, "we're going to finish strong today." The meeting was a review and approval session with every department head present: transport, utilities, green energy, zoning, and public works. There were forms to sign, reports to archive, and a final compliance briefing to deliver. When my turn came, I stood at the front and clicked open the slideshow. I walked them through every milestone, every code exception, every approval that had carried this $42 million project forward. There was no applause, no cheering, just that rare kind of stillness that only comes when people understand the full weight of what has been done. At the end, Leo turned to me. "One more thing," he said. "We want Evelyn to be the final signature on the project's master file. No one else." A file folder was handed to me, thick, pristine, the official documentation of a city-changing endeavor. I held the pen a moment longer than necessary, not for effect, but because I knew what this moment meant. I signed. As I set the pen down, a quiet wave of emotion rolled through me. Not pride, not victory, just completion. After the meeting, I walked down the nearby corridor and stepped outside. The Green Horizon Park had officially opened to the public that morning. Families strolled across newly paved walkways. Children laughed near the water-efficient fountains. The structures stood bold and smart against the backdrop of city towers. Every brick, every blade of native grass, every panel of glass had passed through the invisible funnel of regulation I had helped shape. And now it was theirs. I sat on a bench near the pavilion, the one with my name on it, and watched. A young city intern passed by with a clipboard. She did a double take, then approached shyly. "Are you Evelyn Hartley?" "I am. I just started in zoning review last week," she said, nervous. "We studied your case models and onboarding. You made the fast-track system possible." I smiled gently. "And now it's yours to carry forward." She blinked, then nodded, clearly moved by the exchange. That evening, back at home, I gathered all my files, the early permits, the correspondence, the original charter for Hartley Urban Compliance, and placed them in a fireproof box labeled Legacy. I locked it, slid it under my desk, and exhaled. Because sometimes legacy is not a name on a plaque or a mention in a newspaper. Sometimes, legacy is the unseen bridge between what was broken and what is now possible. Lily called as the sun dipped into the bay. "Mom, guess what? They're naming the new civic building after you." I laughed. "That's getting excessive." "No," she said. "It's justice." Later that night, I walked out to my garden. The tomato plants I had started on the day Spencer fired me were heavy with fruit. I touched one gently, then smiled. From uprooted, to replanted, to flourishing. In the soil, in the city, in myself. The next morning, I woke early, poured coffee into my favorite mug, and opened my laptop. New messages, new projects, new names asking for guidance. And I answered each one. Because this story does not end with a signature. It begins there,